This wasn't supposed to happen. Not like this. Not quietly. Not behind closed doors. Not with contracts being pulled, emails going unanswered, and brand deals suddenly vanishing. Because the real shock isn't the protests, it isn't the petitions, it isn't even the backlash building across Australia, it's this. The money is starting to walk away.
Meghan Markle's Australian embarrassment just gets worse.
Mr. and Mrs. Grifter, they're coming to Australia next month.
Be afraid. Be very afraid.
Meghan Markle, having been dumped by Netflix, is heading down under. She's planning an Aussie cash grab.
You know, I just think this is another Montecito money grab.
For that $3,000, you still have to share a room with another woman and a twin bed.
Oh, wow.
Which is wild.
As well as a group photo with the Duchess of Sussex, which I guarantee is going to be a class photo. Meghan will be in the center. Everyone else will be arrayed. It'll be a one-shot deal. Off you go. That's as close as she is getting to the unwashed masses who are going to pay for this.
She's got yoga straps, pet feeding, gardening tools, bath and shower gel, jewelry, furniture, skin cast, podcasts. Why she's going to teach people how to do a podcast. She was thrown off for that.
Yes. Not sure what we did to deserve this one, and not sure why they would bother.
Oh God, can they just stop with the pseudo-royal tours? I mean, they're like pound store royals at this point. You just can't sort of understand why they're doing this. In a way, it's confected. It's because they're irrelevant. They're falling off the news cycle. Meghan isn't selling any jam.
This woman is desperate for money and is prepared to do pretty much anything to get it.
And it comes from the fact that Meghan is obviously incredibly desperate.
These two just won't give up, and they're just desperate for this relevance. They've got relevance deprivation syndrome, in my view. But, you know, that's a lot of money. Are people really going to turn up to listen to Meghan?
Australia knows better. Her polling has declined significantly there. I don't think they'd get the welcome that they would want.
And they should stump up their own cash for such events. I'm with the 11,000 people who've signed this petition. I imagine most Australians are.
Meghan and Harry, it's just another cheap publicity stunt for them. What's new? What's new?
Australia isn't just a stop, it's a statement that her brand is global, scalable, and here to stay. Okay. I mean, the brand already has Netflix, 10 million in the hole. The brand already has Harry, how much in the hole?
She said that this is where the future lies, but a local poll showed that about 90% of them don't want her anywhere near Australia.
Definitely not, and quite rightly so, actually.
And Meghan's going to do an intimate fireside chat where she's probably going to regurgitate things like, you know, you just have to anchor in your own knowing.
Wow.
Or she might teach you how to trade one bag of pretzels for another bag of pretzels and call that, elevation. I don't know.
Because once upon a time, this story looked unstoppable. A dramatic exit from the monarchy, a bold declaration of independence, a carefully crafted image of reinvention under California sunlight. It all felt like a power play that couldn't fail. The world watched as Meghan Markle and Prince Harry stepped away from the institution. Not quietly, not gradually, but in a way that felt almost cinematic, like they were rewriting the rules of royalty itself. And for a moment, it worked. The deals came flooding in. The headlines never stopped. The narrative was theirs to control. But here's the thing about narratives, they only hold as long as the audience believes them. And suddenly, something has shifted. Not loudly, not officially, but unmistakably. Because behind the scenes of this so-called Australia tour, something strange is happening. Sponsors, the quiet backbone of any high-profile venture, are starting to step back. Not publicly, not with statements, but with distance, with hesitation, with silence. And silence in this world is never neutral. You see, this wasn't just another trip. This was supposed to be a comeback moment, a carefully orchestrated return to a country that once welcomed Meghan with overwhelming admiration, a place where crowds once lined the streets, where cameras flashed endlessly, where the energy felt electric. Australia wasn't just a destination, it was a memory of peak popularity. And now it's the stage for something very different, because the numbers are telling a story no press release wants to say out loud. Tickets priced at nearly $3,000. Exclusive access. Private events. A curated experience wrapped in the language of wellness and purpose. But when those numbers meet public perception, something starts to fracture. The narrative of authenticity begins to collide with the optics of exclusivity. And that's where sponsors get nervous. Not because of one headline, not because of one viral clip, but because of patterns. Patterns of backlash, patterns of controversy, patterns that suggest the brand, the carefully constructed identity, might not be as stable as it once appeared. And that's when the whispers begin. Whispers that certain partners are re-evaluating, that some names that were expected to be attached to this tour are suddenly missing, that agreements once assumed to be secure are now being quietly reconsidered. No announcements, no drama, just absence. And absence speaks louder than any statement ever could.
Netflix has officially cut ties with Meghan Markle's polarizing lifestyle brand as ever. But there's no other way to spin it, is there? She and Harry have been a massive disappointment for Netflix.
Because when the conversation shifts from admiration to skepticism, sponsors don't wait for confirmation, they anticipate risk. And right now, the risk is growing. The petitions alone tell you something deeper is happening. Tens of thousands of signatures, not driven by explosive outrage, but by something colder, something heavier. Fatigue. A sense that the story has been told too many times, in too many ways, with too many contradictions. And for brands, fatigue is dangerous because it means the audience isn't just reacting, they're tuning out. And no sponsor wants to invest in a moment the public is already moving past. But here's where it gets even more complicated, because this isn't just about one tour. It's about what this tour represents. It represents a brand trying to hold on to two opposing realities at the same time: independence and influence, privacy and visibility, separation from the monarchy and reliance on the recognition that monarchy still provides. It's a balancing act that once looked strategic, but now under pressure is starting to look unstable, and sponsors can see that. They see the contradiction. They see the headlines. They see the growing divide between how the story is being presented and how it's being received. And they're asking a question no one wants to answer out loud. What happens if the audience stops believing entirely? Because at that point, it's not just a PR issue. It's a commercial one. And that's why this quiet withdrawal matters more than any protest ever could. Because protests create noise. Noise creates attention. And attention, even negative attention, can still be monetized. But silence kills momentum. Silence is what happens when interest fades, when excitement disappears, when the story stops being worth investing in. And if sponsors are stepping back now, quietly, carefully, strategically, it suggests they're seeing something ahead that others haven't fully processed yet. A shift, a turning point, a moment where the narrative might no longer be enough to sustain the brand. And here's the most unsettling part of all, because while this is happening, while deals are being reconsidered, while support is becoming uncertain, while the foundation of this tour is quietly weakening, the public narrative hasn't caught up yet. The headlines are still focused on the surface, the controversy, the optics. The spectacle died, but underneath that surface, something far more significant is unfolding. Because when sponsors start leaving, they don't just leave an event, that they leave a signal that the confidence is slipping, that a signal that the risk is rising, that a signal that the story might be entering a completely different phase. And the question now isn't whether this tour will go ahead, it's what it will look like by the time it does. Because if this continues, if more partners step back, if more support disappears, if the silence grows louder, then this isn't just a controversial visit anymore, it becomes something else entirely, something unpredictable, something unstable, something that no amount of branding can fully control. And the people closest to this situation, they already feel it. They already know that what's happening behind the scenes is far bigger than what's being shown in public. They know that this isn't just backlash, it's fallout, and it's only just beginning. And here's where everything starts to tighten, because once the first sponsor steps back, even quietly, it doesn't stay contained. It spreads, not like a scandal exploding in headlines, but like a slow leak that no one can quite locate, yet everyone can feel. Because in these circles, hesitation is contagious. One brand pauses, another delays, a third quietly revises terms, and suddenly what was supposed to be a fully backed, polished, high-end international appearance begins to feel thinner, less certain, less protected. What makes this even more unsettling is that none of this needs to be confirmed publicly to be real. In fact, the absence of confirmation is what gives it power. No press conference, no official withdrawals. just subtle changes, missing logos, delayed announcements, partners who were once front-facing now fading into the background. And for those watching closely, those details aren't random. They're signals, carefully controlled, deliberately understated signals that something behind the curtain isn't holding the way it was supposed to. Because this tour, this so-called return to Australia, was never just about showing up. It was about proving something. Proving that the brand still holds weight, that the influence is still intact, that the shift away from royal duties didn't weaken the commercial appeal, it expanded it. That this new identity, built on independence and storytelling and carefully curated exposure, could stand on its own without the institution it once leaned on. But now that proof is being tested in real time. And the results are starting to look complicated because sponsors don't operate on emotion. They don't respond to narratives or intentions or even loyalty. They respond to numbers, perception, trajectory. They look at engagement, sentiment, long-term viability. And what they're seeing right now is not a clean upward story. It's fragmented, it's volatile, it's unpredictable, a mix of attention and resistance, curiosity and criticism, visibility and fatigue. And that kind of environment doesn't inspire investment, it triggers caution. And caution, once it sets in, is very hard to reverse. Because think about the timing. This isn't happening years ago, when the momentum was fresh and the curiosity was at its peak. This is happening after multiple projects, multiple deals, multiple cycles of exposure that have slowly reshaped how the public engages with this story. The initial intrigue has been replaced by analysis. The emotional response has been replaced by scrutiny. And scrutiny is where brands become extremely careful because scrutiny means risk, and risk means distance. And distance is exactly what's starting to appear. But here's where it becomes almost ironic because the very thing that once made this brand so commercially powerful, the connection to royalty, is now the same thing complicating it. Because without that connection, the global attention wouldn't be what it is. The recognition wouldn't be as immediate. The story wouldn't carry the same weight. But with that connection comes expectation, comparison, and a constant shadow that never fully disappears. And right now, that shadow feels heavier than ever. Because while this tour builds itself on independence, on reinvention, on creating something new, the public perception keeps pulling it back to what it used to be. And that tension is where the cracks start to show. Sponsors see that tension. They see the way every move is interpreted, reinterpreted, debated, dissected. They see how quickly a narrative can shift from positive to critical. And they ask themselves a simple question: is this stable enough to attach our name to? And increasingly, the answer seems to be uncertain. And uncertainty is the one thing brands avoid above all else. Because a sponsor doesn't just invest money, they invest association. They attach their identity to a moment, a person, a narrative. And if that narrative starts to wobble, even slightly, the safest move isn't to defend it, it's to step back before anyone notices, which is exactly what appears to be happening here. Quietly, gradually, strategically. And the effect of that kind of withdrawal isn't immediate chaos. It's something more subtle, but far more damaging. It changes the atmosphere. It shifts the tone. It creates a sense that something isn't fully aligned, that what's being presented on the surface isn't being fully supported underneath. And once that feeling sets in, it spreads, not just among sponsors, but among audiences, among media, among everyone watching this unfold. Because people may not see the contracts, but they can feel the hesitation. They can sense when something isn't landing the way it was supposed to. They can pick up on the gaps. And those gaps start to define the story. Because now, instead of a confident return, this tour is starting to look like a question mark. A moment that's being watched not just for what it delivers, but for what it reveals. A test of whether the brand still carries the same pull, the same influence, the same ability to turn attention into sustained support. And that's a much harder thing to control, because attention is easy to generate. Controversy can do that overnight. But sustained support, that requires trust, consistency, a narrative that people and brands feel comfortable aligning with over time. And right now, that alignment feels fragile. Which brings us to the part no one is saying out loud, but everyone involved is quietly calculating. What happens if this continues? What happens if more sponsors step back? If more partnerships hesitate? If the foundation of this tour becomes less about collaboration and more about damage control? Because at that point, it's no longer just a controversial visit. It becomes a turning point, a moment where the direction of the brand shifts, not because of a single event, but because of a cumulative pattern that finally becomes impossible to ignore. And those patterns are already there, in the deals that didn't extend, in the projects that didn't deliver the way they were expected to, in the growing gap between the scale of the ambition and the consistency of the results. Sponsors notice patterns, and once they recognize one, they act early, which is why this quiet withdrawal matters so much more than any headline ever could. Because headlines fade, controversy cycles, public opinion shifts, but sponsor confidence, once it starts to drop, it rarely comes back the same. And so this story, the one that started as a bold reinvention, now feels like it's entering a completely different phase. Not explosive, not dramatic in the obvious sense, but something more complex, more uncertain, more revealing, because the real drama isn't what's being said publicly, it's what's happening privately, in conversations, in decisions, in calculations that determine whether this brand moves forward or starts to slowly, quietly lose the support that once made it unstoppable. And that's the kind of shift you don't see all at once. You feel it, you notice it, and by the time it becomes undeniable, it's already too late to reverse, because by then the story has already changed, and everyone involved knows it.